Good afternoon, everyone. I am just going to get us started in just a moment. I still see that people are starting to come on in. I'm going to do my best to make sure I have a view of the chat box. Andrea, can you give me a sound check? Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Good. Thank you. All right. Yay, we've got so many people here this afternoon. I'm happy. I know that we have more registered, but I am going to respect the fact that you have all been here on time and go ahead and get us started. So, welcome to Become a Master of Hiring. I am Allison Dunn, owner and head executive coach here at Deliberate Directions. I am sharing with you what I've learned in recruiting talent for dozens of industries over the past 25 years. And I know that right now we are in a huge shift. We've just spent the last few years in a market that's had ultimately the very lowest unemployment in history. And now all of a sudden we're in the midst of the largest available market of A-player talent we've ever seen in business. This is all obviously due to the pandemic and that dozens of industries have had to furlough some of their best people, and those A players won't last long. So I'm a firm believer, regardless of whether it's low unemployment or high unemployment, your people are your greatest asset. And that is why we feel it's so important to share a proven hiring process, because honestly, it's vital to your long-term success. At Deliberate Directions, we're on a mission to create abundance in our business community by helping business leaders build strong, thriving businesses. So whether you're here today to upgrade your team as part of your recovery efforts, especially if you've let go or lost poor performers in this particular COVID process, or just due to bad past hires, whether you need to rebuild your team because you've lost some of your own A players, or you're ready to hire your very first team member and want to make sure that you do it right. Or more like 50% of our clients, they're recruiting for key positions or completely newly created positions due to the evolving roles, responsibilities, and the reconfiguration that some of our business operations have had to undergo. And you want to make sure that you capture the great talent currently available in the market. So regardless of your reason for attending today, this recruiting process will show you how to get the right people in the right seat so that you can emerge from this crisis better and stronger. And I think it's really important to recognize that, it's very costly to get it wrong. And I just brought up a stat this afternoon so I could share with you. So according to the Society of Human Resource Management, the average cost to hire an employee is $4,124. And I feel like that's on the low side typically. And it takes about 42 days to fill a position. So the cost of a bad hire averages about $17,000, and I think that that's a low estimate, and typically for an entry-level position, and it just goes dramatically up from there because of the lost in time, the training and the retraining costs, the loss in profits, the impact to disengagement, and then the replacement, and just the list goes on and on. So grab a notepad and a pen and let's get started. All right, so I've done a quick overview of being able to show you kind of the 5 steps that we're going to go through in this process. So it's really basically 5 key steps. So we're going to be covering step 1, which is how to create a scoreboard. In step 2, we're going to be talking about how to sourcing your very best candidates. In step 3, we're going to be talking about the screening process. How do you screen out all of these applicants so that you really get to step 4, selecting the top tier, best qualified, best fitting candidates. And then step 5, it doesn't stop until you're selling and they've accepted the offer. So we're gonna cover that today as well. So I like to look at this as a hiring 101. It's almost an obvious statement, but you need to know what you're looking for. So one of the most important things to consider when hiring is to really spend some time to know exactly what you're looking for in a candidate and become familiar with the role that you are hoping to fill. Obviously, not familiarizing yourself with the position before you begin the hiring process makes it very murky because you tend to shift based on the candidates that are in front of you. But it also could mean that you hire someone you like, but that just isn't right for the position, or maybe they are right for the position, but they're not a very good fit for the company. So I look at the 5 steps, and obviously this one's starting the most important thing, knowing what you're looking for. The first step I like to lead clients through is creating a scoreboard or scorecard for your ideal candidate. So the best way that I found to gain the clarity on what exactly you're looking for in your next team member, and this is regardless of whether you're hiring for a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer, a general manager, a customer service representative, an office manager, or just a warehouse clerk. It does start by creating a scoreboard. So let me talk you through what the scoreboard helps you do. It starts with creating the actual title, or the position title that you're going to list inside of your job posting, and that will be part of their job description. This you want to be really clear about, because when candidates go out and search for a position, you don't want to get too creative. I crossed out, I was reviewing a job posting for a client, and they actually listed, we're looking for a unicorn. And I'm pretty sure that candidates are not looking to search for unicorn positions. So you want to be really clear on the title. The other thing that we want you to create on the scorecard is the mission statement for the position. And it is not necessarily the same thing as the mission statement for your business. It is the mission of, when you add this person to your team, what are they going to be accomplishing as part of their role? And I'm just going to quickly read to you an example mission. So this was created for a sales business development personnel. And so the mission for this position was to help create an awesome brand and deliver emotionally engaging communications for sales, trainings, and programs that inspire and move prospects, clients, partners, and the community into our desired action. So mission statements can get as creative, as lengthy as you want, but creating a mission for the position, I think, is a really powerful way to help you create a job posting that sings to someone. You'll also need to identify the results that you're expecting from this team member. What that means is really the outcomes you're expecting from the role that they'll be taking. And often these show up as things like metrics. So whether it's percentages, increases or decreases, the actual numbers that they may be responsible for, and numbers as far as dollars or revenues or efficiencies. The next part of the scorecard is to identify the key attributes or the characteristics that your candidate must already possess. And these things include strengths, values, attitude, things that hopefully represent your core culture, and then the key attributes of what they would be bringing to their particular role. So attributes do change based on the type of the role. Like the attributes you might be looking for from an accountant would be vastly different from the attributes and characteristics that you'd be looking for from a marketing person. And then you finally get to a list of key skills. So these are the skills that you would require or you would like your candidate to have. This will be the basis of crafting your job posting and then the actual job description. So I just want to affirm this is a great starting point, because the effort you put into crafting the scorecard for your open position will be effort really well spent. This is a tool that we encourage our clients to use as a benchmark for the job posting, but also it helps lean in the candidate screening process, which is step 2, the selection process, which is step 3, and then the shortlisting of your candidates, which is step 4. And then in addition to that, it rolls over to, once they're onboarded, you can use this for their review process, their, whether it's a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 6-month, and 1 year check-in review. So you've done all the hard work before they've even come on board, and it's given you a ton of clarity. So Next, so once you've created your scoreboard, you are now ready to be able to create your job posting. And we have all come across the familiar job posting that reads kind of just like everyone else's out there. So find the perfect and dynamic candidate. You need to try something a little bit different. A job posting is essentially an ad. So sell your business, totally shine on why it is that you're a great place for employment, why you're a great place to work, and get them excited to apply. Your posting is a perfectly crafted message to your ideal candidate. So fine-tuning it so that it speaks to your candidate is really important. And use language that will have them reading it and then thinking, oh my gosh, this was written for me. So keep in mind that it should be simple, specific, and specific to the job, and list the skills and requirements. This will allow for at least the best candidates to rise to the top, and they move forward from the general interest of checking off the skills that qualify them and have them take the next step and are eager to apply. So now you're ready to actually post your job. So I'm just going to take a quick pause. I saw some comments coming in, so I'm just going to bring up the chat box, and I just want you to be thinking about. Kelly, your question was, what was the 30, 60, 90? And that is fantastic. I'm not going to go back, but on the scorecard, I indicate that there's 30, 60, 90, 120, and 150. So once we create a scorecard, and this is a tool that we use in our coaching practice, you create a scorecard, and then the manager meets with that new hire or the person that is on your team, and you each do a every 30-day review. So the scorecard is the basis for your review. The employee or the new teammate or the person on your team completes the scorecard with their own rankings. And I didn't include rankings on the scorecard, but I have some thoughts on that, but that's a whole nother training. And then you also, as their supervisor or manager, complete the ranking on how they're doing on their scorecard. And then you have a meeting of the minds. And the scorecard actually has 2 to 3 pages when we use it as a review process. And so it's just a great tool to check in. You're welcome, Kelly. I hope that was helpful. Okay, so the key thing, now that you know what you are hiring and you have clarity around what the job is asking for and what you want to post, I really encourage you considering using a hiring platform that streamlines your hiring process. At Deliberate Directions, we use a platform called Hiring Steps, and that is hiringsteps.com, and it just saves us a ton of time. It's an incredibly cost-effective platform, so everything in all in one place for a low cost. If I think it's less than $30 during your hiring period, and we usually do a hiring period within a month, and then you get cost savings for having multiple positions open. So it's super cost effective. It's all in one platform. Multiple people can have access to it. So if there's a recruiter and a hiring manager and other people who are evaluating your candidates. But in addition to that, it has all of these functionalities from entering your job description, being able to make tweaks to it. If the candidates that you have start applying aren't quite on the mark, you may recognize that you need to make an edit in your job posting, and then it repushes it back out to your syndicate ad boards. And then it has some really fun functionalities, but it really allows you to communicate with the candidate quickly, rank them and shortlist them, and move them through the whole process while keeping it paperless, which I think is incredible. So I don't know if you use this system, but this is a system, and we absolutely love it. One of the things that I'm able to offer today for anyone who isn't happy with their hiring platform or who has never used one, I just really encourage you to test it out on your next candidate. And we've given you a promotion code when you set up an account, and that is AC62. So move past that. So you're ready to actually move to step 2. So hopefully you're using a hiring platform. If you're not, regardless, you still need to figure out exactly how you're going to source your candidates and figure out where they're going to come from. And What I would say is my favorite strategy for all hiring is to definitely make sure that you use referrals as your sourcing. So that would be your current employees. They do an amazing job at pre-selecting candidates for you. They do a great job at helping you sell the business and why it's great to work for you. And often they tend to be the most highly qualified candidates that will tend to stay with you on average 3 years longer than a typical candidate. So consider clients and strategic alliances as potential referral sources as well. So here I've listed a couple of like obvious things that not all businesses think to do. So you want to get the job posted inside of whatever industry forum you're part of. Obviously your business and local newspaper, make sure the job is posted on your website, through your business social media, as well as through your employees' social media, if they're willing to share it, and especially if you give a referral bonus, that would be beneficial. Because we use the hiring platform Hiring Steps, it gives a link so that no matter what platform and what referral source, it all links back to the hiring platform where it goes in paperlessly and virtually into the system. So then, obviously, I believe casting the largest net possible is an important element of hiring and hiring well. The challenge that I see most businesses get into is they get busy, so busy that they don't have time to hire. And then they just hire someone that they know or a referral from a friend or a brother or a sister. And sometimes that can be a true recipe for disaster. And I'm sure some of you would have war stories that relate to that. So I do believe that I would encourage you to consider using, obviously, a syndicated platform such as Indeed, Monster, LinkedIn, Craigslist, or Recruiter.com. The platform that we use sends out the posting to all of these job boards, but then you can actually boost it so that it stays top of feed, and you get to choose which platform or all of them and kind of make the investment level that you're interested in. I will say in the last 6 to 12 months, the two best hiring platforms that we use for our clients is Indeed. And then we've honestly had a really great response from Craigslist for mid to entry level type positions as well. So super cost effective and effective. So so once you have your candidates coming in and applying for the position, now is actually, I consider to be the most heavy lifting. This is when you have to start screening the candidates. I just recruited for a position this past month. So during the month of, actually it was mid-April to mid-May, and we had over 200 applicants, which was super exciting and also a bit overwhelming. That is a significant response. I'd say we usually see about half of that. So between 75 and 100 candidates is what I typically like to make sure that we have as a funnel to kind of screen through. 200 significant. So we have a few things that we like to use as a screening filter, and these are all available in Hiring Steps, but I think a lot of platforms offer it. So in most hiring platforms, they offer you a keyword filter. This is the filter that the hiring platform puts the resume, the words used on the resume through, and then it will highlight the words that you deem to be relevant or most important on the candidate, and then it auto ranks it in the system for you. So let me just give you an example. If you require someone have supervisory and management background requirements, you can filter their resume for supervise, supervisor, or a version of those words in exact match or paraphrasing, or management or manager as a title. And it will rank those candidates that have those words inside of their resume at the top of the funnel first. So it kind of weighs it based on the words. The second thing that we suggest is using the pre-screening questions. So these are both open-ended and open-ended and free-form questions, as well as just simple yes or no questions. And pre-screening questions become really helpful if you have some key things that are important that should the candidate not have that you wouldn't invest the time in getting them certified in that, or it's a mandatory part of the job. So a simple one may be that maybe they do deliveries for you and it's mandatory that they have a valid driver's license. If they don't have one, they really can't be a delivery driver. You would be surprised at how many people apply, even though that may be a requirement, but then you don't have to waste your time looking at the candidate if they don't meet the criteria. And then you can ask a free-form question. Another great screening question I like to, some people go like, what should I use for my pre-screening question? So think of something that the job must have. So it may be a certification, a certain type of licensure, maybe a level of expertise. So would you be an expert in the type of platform we use for your CRM system or for your cash management point of service system? So you may want your candidate to have that. And then the last screening tool, which I love, is the audio voice recording messaging tool that's available through Hiring Steps specifically, and actually is the primary reason that I actually use that platform. It allows you to have the candidate receive a phone call once they've uploaded and applied for the job, and you can ask them anything. So it's a voice recording that you are asking them for a little bit more detail, and you let them answer that question. So for me, when I utilize this particular screening tool, which I do 90% of the time, there's a few jobs that it's not relevant to. The audio recording first is the screening tool. So if they've not completed the recording, the Hiring Steps platform tells them they've actually not yet fully applied for the job, and it sends them 2 reminders to remind them to complete the recording. But the recording tells you so much about the individual, how they think on their feet. Are they able to follow the instructions? Do they answer the question or questions completely based on the message recording that you leave? And some people answer it in 8 seconds, and some people, have 8 minutes. And it's just an interesting process. But I've found this to be an incredibly valuable screening tool that deselects people pretty quickly. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the screening tools allow you to, 1, eliminate candidates that just simply don't complete the process, eliminate candidates that do not meet the minimum requirements that you have for your job, and also eliminate candidates that meet requirements, but you can hear or see based on their experience that they don't seem like they'd be a good fit for your company. So that now takes us to our top candidates, and this is where we start to set up our interview processes. I see I have a question come in. So Gary's asking, are the questions live from the audio recording? When we create the job post, I usually help my clients create the custom recording that they're asking the candidates to complete. So everyone is getting the same recording. Each candidate is recording it, and it actually gets posted with their resume right inside the platform, and the recording is right there next to kind of where they've been ranked, where the deselection tools identified where they are. So they are recording it live, and or they have the option to call back if they're not prepared to do it at that moment. So they do receive an email if they don't do it at the time of resume submission. So hopefully that answers your question. So we're still in the screening process, even though it looks like we've moved on into selection. We're not. So I consider the phone screen, and then the screen interview to be part of the screening process. So we typically recommend both of these. A phone screen interview is typically, it could be up to as many as 20 of our shortlisted candidates. Now that feels like it's a lot, but these are calls that take less than typically 5 to 10 minutes. And we basically evaluate whether we move them on to the screen interview or the first initial interview, which is a face-to-face. So what we listen for in the phone screen interview is how do they answer the phone? If they don't answer the phone, what does their personal voice message box say? And what might it say about them? Are they responsive to our call? Are they aware of who we are when we're suggesting that they've applied? Are they confused as to what company they've applied to and don't remember what the job is? I mean, these are all kind of telltale signs. And then basically the two things that we confirm, if we get someone on the phone and they're super excited, they're like, oh yes, I'm so glad to hear from you. They're eager and interested. I find out whether they're still available and whether they're still interested. And I just listen for what the candidate is telling me. And then if I feel like that's a quality call, then we move them on to scheduling a first initial interview. In helping clients hire, this is typically an interview with me as the coach to just give my clients their very best top tier 2 to 3 candidates. But the first initial interview face-to-face could be a hiring manager, like a human resource or someone who's before the hiring manager to help pre-qualify, hopefully 6 to 12 candidates. And I'd say I usually aim for 6 to 8 first initial interviews. And these are typically 30 minutes. They're back-to-back. It usually takes a half a day to complete them, and I do like to line them up so they're all in a row and not gaps of time in between. And in that 30-minute interview, I typically ask 7 to 10 relevant questions around qualifications and their experience, and just listen for what the candidate is telling me when they answer. So I'm looking for level of interest. I'm looking for their level of experience or expertise. I'm asking questions that really dive into their skills. I listen for their ability to sell themselves. I look for their ability, kind of characteristics that I look for of whether I feel like they fit with the team. I definitely look for attention to detail and listen for how they express their own values and priorities. I have a couple of questions coming in, so I'm just going to pause for a moment before I finish that. Pamela's asking, the audio screening was automated, but it's done in real time with the screener. The audio recording is not done with anyone. It's done through the platform. So you record it in the platform, and then every single time someone applies, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock a.m. in the morning, they're listening to the recording and responding, and it gets uploaded to the hiring platform. So it's seamless once you've recorded it, and then you can listen to everyone's answers. Kelly is asking, do you schedule these or just call? I assume for the first, after the initial phone call. So I'm not sure what the question is. I definitely want to make sure that I answer that correctly. When we do the outbound calls, sometimes I automatically schedule them. So the first initial interview, if I get a candidate on the phone who's super excited and highly engaged and still available and interested, I would schedule them right then, because when I make those calls, I know when I'm doing my first face-to-face interviews. If they are returning a call to me, I do wait typically to hear back from a candidate, and that kind of leans in and expresses their interest. So I hope that answers your question. I did not go into detail, because we do go into detail a little bit later on the actual selection interviews, but I do want to provide you some guidance on the screen interview questions. We offer kind of a general list of these. It can be found on our website. The guide is called Hiring for Character, and it's located in our resource hub at delivereddirections.com, and it's right there for you to download for free. So at this point, we have just completed the screening process. We've done our back-to-back 30-minute interviews. I just want to give you one more tip before I show you how we actually start the selection. So one of my favorite things to do pre-interview is to give our candidates some pre-interview homework. So if they've made it through the phone screen and they get to the first 30-minute first interview, we give our candidates a pre-employment questionnaire. And this is used as a screening tool also. And we ask them to bring the completed assignment with them to their first interview. And they're also welcome to send it ahead of time if they choose, but it has to be ahead of the first interview. It gives the interview insights into the candidate's writing style, the level of the candidate's confidence, character, maybe salary expectations, This also supplements the 30-minute interview because the 30-minute interview is pretty fast and furious. It's not a lot of time. And this gives me a lot of, the hiring manager, just some good in-depth sense of where the candidate is. And it really helps with the shortlisting to the top candidates so much easier. So I've just put on the screen, we customize the pre-interview homework based on the industry we're hiring for. The one I have up here was for a medical office for a receptionist type job. So a pre-employment questionnaire might ask a question like, have you had experience in this field before? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident of a person are you? What type of team player are you? And it's interesting, maybe some offices are looking for humble candidates and maybe other positions are looking for very, confident and self-confident individuals. So there's no wrong answer on these. And so that's an example of some pre-interview homework. All right, so we're moving right along. We're moving us into step 4. So at this point, we should know who our top 2 to 4 candidates are. And now you can take those top candidates and set up some in-depth interviews. Once you've screened and they're now in step 4, you're going to move them on to what I consider to be more intense interviews. These are the top candidate interviews. And if your candidates have been properly vetted by the first 2 steps, and you really feel like they may be a good fit, now it's time to move them forward and get this interview set up. This is a good opportunity to put together a group of people that would make up the team if the candidate were to be hired. During the second interview, I definitely suggest a small portion of the time, maybe the first hour, to be with the manager or the leader that they would directly report to. And then the follow on moving into more of a small team / coworker colleague type round table interview. This interview process, I usually suggest that you should set aside 2 to 3 hours for each candidate to make this happen. I'm also a big fan of potentially having all candidates at the same time, but I really do feel like if you're able to narrow it down to 2 or 3, that this is an incredibly worthwhile process. So in this interview, you're getting some face-to-face time with the hiring manager, and then you're also getting a roundtable interview style where each person who is part of the interview panel has a specific question that they ask the candidate. I believe so strongly that involving your team gives them a chance to weigh in on this decision. And the interview questions should be focused around highlighting achievements, specifically around the scorecard metrics and skills that you're looking for, having them really articulate any failures that they've had in the past around any of the scoreboard metrics. And then questions that really shine a spotlight on the important part of the job that you're hiring for. So these interviews should be at your place of business. And if the interview goes really well, I really encourage you to take that time, obviously, to take a tour of the facility and meet other current employees. I'm going to move on to the actual interview questions. I'm just going to quickly look at the chat box. Okay, it's like we've answered questions. All right, so interview, such a critical component, and one of the things that I think a lot of hiring organizations, a lot of people who need to hire feel pretty inadequate about. And so I just want to make sure, I think it's really important that you should always be prepared with your interview questions ahead of time, and allow for some looseness as well so that you can engage the candidate in conversation. So here are some useful questions to lead a discussion with your candidates, and should focus really being built around your scorecard that you've created. And I'm going to share 5 quick questions that you can then customize to your scorecard. So 1, what is the candidate's career goals? Question number 2, what is important to you and what's not important to you? So understanding what's important to your candidate, and as an open question, I think provides a valuable insight. Ask your candidate, what are some of the biggest strengths and that they bring to the table? And then ask to have them give you really specific examples of where those strengths have been able to shine. Number 4 would be, what are the areas that they perceive that they need improvement in? That's always a powerful conversation. And then the 5th question is, and this is the most in-depth portion of this interview, is having your candidate tell you about their last 5 positions. So going in depth on their job experience, their highlights, their wins, their losses, and then also the last 5 bosses that they've had, and getting some insight about what they appreciated about working with their bosses, what was a challenge for them working with their bosses in each of these roles, and then asking them how might their boss rate them for their performance during their time with them. These are all important things to cover, but again, it's important for you to go prepared, but don't limit yourself to just your prepared questions. Some of my best interviews, the candidate comes prepared also, and I kind of, I encourage you to allow that engagement and be open and to the conversation, heading down a path that maybe you hadn't intended, and then bringing it back with your questions. So your job as an interviewer is to ask questions. But it's also important that you allow your candidate to do most of the talking. It's here that you become the listener, that you decide if this is the right person to fill the position you're hiring for based on the answers to the questions you're asking. And if I were to give you a ratio, I would say you should be speaking 25% and the candidate should be speaking 75%. And I've been in many interviews myself where that goes off board. So keep that in mind. So aside from the work qualifications of your candidate, find out what your candidate is passionate about outside of work. What do they like to do in their free time? And then just listen to what they have to say. To find the right fit, it's important to get a well-rounded look at your candidate. So knowing what kinds of activities spark their interest, I think is a really important part of understanding what your candidate is about. And then obviously, at the end of each interview, be sure to make sure to ask your candidate if they have any questions. The ideal candidate should have questions that shows that they were highly engaged during the interview process, questions that don't just require a yes or no response from you. You want your candidate to be as engaged and prepared as you are in your position as the interviewer. And I always have a pause when a candidate does not have any questions. It does definitely tell a story. So be sure that before you wrap up, that they have had a chance to ask all of their questions during the interview. So at the close of each interview, always give your candidate a good idea of what they can expect in terms of next steps, am I to expect a call back from you? What are the follow-on steps beyond this particular interview phase? And then also give them feedback, how should they expect to hear from you should they not be your chosen candidate? I always try to do my very best to give a time frame here so that so they understand what to expect. If you have a really great candidate, but you need some time to interview the other, the remaining candidates that you have on the list, you want that candidate to remain interested in the position so that they don't take another job while you're finishing your hiring process. So be really clear and honest with your candidate. And this can, just remember, this is the beginning of potentially a long, valuable partnership. So you can't over-communicate to your candidates for sure. All right, so also part of the selection process includes what I call conducting reference interviews. Reference interviews should be based on your candidate giving you a list of references. And I usually mandate that the reference needs to be either someone that was that they reported to, someone who was with their boss, a fellow coworker, peer, and or a subordinate that they worked with at a company. Typically, I aim for 5 to 7 reference interviews, and obviously that depends on the level of the position for sure. So here are some basic questions that you should ask during your reference interviews. One, just make sure you have an understanding of what the relationship is with the candidate. So how do you know this person? And how is it that how did you work with them at so-and-so company? So understanding the relationship. 2, what were some of this person's areas for improvement? And I'm going to assume that they will know what they are. And if the candidate has provided their own perspective of what areas they needed for improvement, maybe you can say, Sally suggested that she really struggled with time management while she worked at your organization. And they can be like, oh gosh, you know what? She actually is really fantastic in time management, but our corporate office made a huge demand on, so like you can help vet some of the areas for improvement and lead the conversation. Question number 3 would be, how would you rate their overall performance? And you can give it on the scale metric that makes the most sense to you. I'm a big fan of 1 to 10, but you get to choose whether rating or giving them a grade. Question number 4 would be, that this person mentioned that they struggled with something, and so time management may be the area to throw this in. So how much of an impact did that have on the job while they worked for you? And then depending on the answers to the last 4 questions, if you've got short answers from your reference candidate, I always like to ask the easy question, which is, would you rehire them? And that's a simple yes or no, and it's a very telling question, and often sometimes the only question that that we really get the most out of. So consider having candidates also take a DISC assessment. And I know that many of you on the call are familiar with what that is, but it is a very dynamic tool that takes candidates about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And it helps basically provide you insight into the candidate's communication style, their values, their motivators, their work preferences, how they learn, and then their general overall personality style. This is invaluable tool that will help you really make sure that the candidate who showed up to the interview also syncs with who they are on the inside. And it is really invaluable, especially if you have a tiebreaker. So for some positions, the other tool that you might need to consider, depending on what kind of organization you are, is consider a background check. I know that this is a really important step for certain industries, but both the DISC assessment and the background check are tools that are available in the Hiring Steps platform, as well as through me. So they're just easy things to be able to kind of just make sure that you had that perfect candidate and there's nothing hidden behind it. And then, of course, I definitely don't want to forget that, I always suggest a bit of cyber stalking, going up to social media and making sure that there's nothing that's going to throw off or raise flags or concerns there. So I try not to do it on the onset, but before we make a final candidate selection or when we're down to a top candidate, pool of 2 to 4, I think a little cyber stalking is necessary. So before you make a final decision, make sure you ask yourself if the candidate would be a good fit culturally, considering what is important that defines the culture at your company. And can you picture this candidate fitting in socially? Imagine that they be added to the atmosphere and the culture. I mean, every single person we add into our team impacts the culture in so many ways. So is this going to be a positive impact or a potential negative impact? And just recognizing that when you add people, it does add in some way. I've got a quick question that's come in from Cornelia. Her question is regarding references. So is checking references truly helpful? Nobody gives out a reference that wouldn't be a positive one. So that is such a great question, Cornelia. I do think, so I truly do believe that asking for references, not what the candidate is giving you, but actually asking for the references based on references inside of their past jobs, preferably bosses. So people who led, supervised, or managed them in some capacity. And if that person is no longer there, then asking for a teammate. I think that references do tell you something even when they may not be telling you something. So I do think it's an important step and a critical step not to skip, because you can learn something new or something bad or good about the candidate. I hope that answers your question. So making sure that your candidate do like the gut check, like, you know, can you actually picture yourself working with this person? And do they seem fair and considerate and communicative and open and ready to help? These are just a few things to think about before you make the final call. So now we're moving on to the final step. So now you're ready to make the offer. So if everything goes well, and you're now ready to make that offer and hire that next great employee, you're solidly in step 5, which is selling. So how do you get the candidate to accept the job offer? Up until this point, you've invested a pretty significant amount of time doing steps 1 through 4, creating the scorecard, sourcing and paying for the ad posting, paying referrals or references back for the candidates, doing your full vetting and screening, and doing the on-site selection process. So don't stop selling the candidate. What I will tell you is that people accept job offers that accomplish five things, and it's called the 5 F's. And I believe this tip is from the book Upgrading. So the five F's that they outline there are fit, family, freedom, fortune, and fun. And so I'm just going to quickly cover what those each mean. So fit means that they're a good fit for the scorecard that you've created. Do they have the key attributes, the skills, the requirements? Do they bring to the table the ability to provide the results and outcomes that you're looking for in the role? So is it a good fit for them? Is it within their natural strengths and tendencies? Family. Family is not whether they're going to have a family or whether they're expecting to have a family, but I mean specifically, do they have specific needs around their family? Do they have any constraints that you need to consider when making the offer? And that could be special needs. I'm not exactly sure, but just to understand whether they have any constraints. The third F is freedom. And this is ever so more important when we're talking about the upcoming generations. So freedom possibly of time, freedom of how to accomplish the job, freedom of creating the actual job duties that they do, and then, you know, freedom of, you know, do they get vacation time, and is there, can they work on their own schedule and whatnot. The fourth F is fortune, and this is really comprised of the earnings potential. So being really clear in your offer letter and selling the compensation package that you're providing, whether it is, you know, just an hourly wage or whether it's a base pay or salary. Does it include bonuses? Don't forget to outline if it includes commissions. Does your company have a profit sharing, and all the perks and benefits that you offer? Monetary ones as well as softer ones, such as culture and food and kitchenettes and ping pong tables and whatnot. So make sure that you wrap up your entire compensation package clearly when you're trying to sell it, both verbally so it's understood, providing all the documents to outline it, as well as have it in your written offer letter. And then the last one is fun. I don't know anyone who goes to work who doesn't actually want to feel like the work that they do is fun. So the work itself needs to be something that does seem exciting to this candidate. Hopefully you've been able to sell them on your fun culture, on the fact that your mission has a lot of meaning to it, and that the work that they'll be doing is very fulfilling. So I want to personally thank you so much for attending this webinar. I know that for me, it means a lot to be able to share this critical process with people who are ready to hire that next great employee. I just want to just really emphasize that if you're still doing the paper platform, like if you don't have a platform and you're still accepting resumes by paper and by mail and by email, and it's very, making it way more complicated than it needs to be, hiringsteps.com makes things 100 times, if not 1,000 times more simple. So make sure you use a promo code AC62 if you do. And so now it's time to get started. I first want to say I have an offer, but I also want to say, please don't stay stuck. Reach out to me if you have any questions regarding what I've covered today, and that I am always happy to help. And remember, hiring is the easy part. And so if what we've covered, well, first off, we've covered a lot today in just under an hour. And if what we've shared leaves you wanting more guidance and tools, we are offering a recruiting and onboarding high performance talent 3-part virtual series. And that is broken out into basically 3 sessions. We do a deep dive on customizing your scorecard. In session 2, we work on working on your interview skills by creating questions and a process that is authentic to you, but also hones in the questions that you need to be asking your candidates and the techniques to doing that. And then the 3rd session is an onboarding. So, creating an onboarding program is just as important as having a really good recruiting system. So the onboarding program that will integrate your new candidate really quickly and win the heart of your new rock star employee. So we are doing these 3 sessions at individual sessions or the whole 3 session series. So individually for $195 and then all 3 of them for $495 today for attendees. So if this is something that you are interested in reserving your seat in this series, feel free to email me directly. So with that, I am happy. I am here. We have about 8 more minutes in the hour that I've planned for, and I am definitely here to answer any questions that anyone may have, but thank you all so much. So, oh, you're welcome, Troy. That's fantastic. I am happy, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. I'm happy to kind of unmute you and work through any questions you might have. Oh, question. So thanks for that question, Andrea. How much is it to just hire you guys to handle the hiring process? The cost of hiring, I'm just going to give you an average blend. I'd say mid-level position to entry-level position when I'm working with my clients is 50% of the typical cost. So I usually charge about $3,800 to do the entire process for non-clients, and it's about $1,850 to do it for clients that work with us on through a coaching agreement. And then I've also done some executive hires, which is a completely different ballpark. But I think that generally, hopefully, will answer the question. Thanks for asking that, Andrea. Any other questions that I can answer? All right. Well, I don't see anyone coming through. I'm going to hang out for a few minutes. Feel free to raise your hand, and I'm happy to unmute you if you would like a couple of minutes and some guidance. Awesome. Thank you all so very much. We'll be sending out a copy of this recording to you all this afternoon, so you'll have it as a reference tool.